Last month, Democrats became crazier than white girls at a Drake concert when Betty DeVos was nominated for Secretary of Education. Democrats criticized her for her support of charter schools and voucher programs. To those of you who don't know, charter schools are schools that get tax dollars from our government that are alternatives to traditional K-12 public schooling. For instance, they may be a chain of private schools or even online schools or religious schools. And the push for charter schools as a means to reform our education system have had some big names behind them, such as Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, and even my cat Alfie. But he's a piece of shit who tears up the rug, so no one should care. Movies funded by wealthy businessmen such as Waiting for Superman claim that charter schools are the only way for us to close the achievement gap for our minority students. And also managed to be the only movie in the last 10 years with Superman in the title that wasn't completely unwatchable. I'm looking at you, Henry Cavill. However, in all of the hoopla of charter schools, which has been endorsed of people by both parties, including Barack Obama, one question has yet to come up. Do they work? And this is the topic of today's book, Reign of Error by Diana Ratvich. Ratvich claims that the corporate reform movement for our education system has been at best ineffective, and at worst, a bigger catastrophe than pineapple on pizza. Ratvich first asserts that the constant narrative that our public schools are failing is a false one. Research tells us that 85% of people like their own public school, but only 13% of people say that our public school system is good. This means that people love their public school, they just think they got lucky and everyone else's suck. The reason for this is because the constant bombardment of news and documentaries like Waiting for Superman perpetuate the myth further that our schools are failing somewhere and we need to save them. They point out that our test scores are falling behind other countries and we must do something now, and that charter schools are our only hope. However, while Ratvich agrees that our education system is having problems, she dispels with the notion that the solution to our problems are charter schools, and points out some of the biggest lies that corporate reformers tell. Lie number one: charter schools do better than public schools. The truth is, on average, public schools do as well as most charter schools. Sure, you might see a news report about some amazing charter school that's doing great things, the same way your friend tells you he smashed an absolute 10 when he was on vacation, and yet when he's with you, he can't even get a girl to look at him. As a matter of fact, charter schools have a tendency to boost their scores up by expelling kids that may cause trouble, or by not accepting kids with disabilities. For instance, the charter school KIPP, which was heavily featured in Waiting for Superman, has been accused of having extremely high expulsion rates, which means that their test scores are only higher because they keep expelling the bad students. But public schools are required to take all students regardless. Lie number two: teacher accountability will improve our kids' education. A big accusations from conservatives and corporate reformers say that the reason our school system sucks is because of teachers' unions. They believe that because teachers can't get fired, they don't have to be good teachers, and therefore they're all lazy. And if we could only fire the bad ones, we can improve the schools. The problem with this argument is, as you might have guessed by now, there's no evidence it's true. For instance, Massachusetts has very strong teachers unions and is always the top ranked state in terms of education. However, states in the Deep South have weak teachers unions and have test scores that are worse than Donald Trump's dance moves. It's almost like teachers unions don't actually correlate with student performance. Or take Michelle Rhee, a woman who was superintendent of Washington, D.C. and decided to take on the teachers union. Michelle Rhee fired nearly a third of teachers in Washington, D.C. who she thought were lazy and incompetent. But when the testing results came back, it showed that the increase in students' aptitude wasn't any better than previous superintendents. Lie number three: poverty isn't the problem in our schools. The real problem with our schools is not our school system or our teachers, but is related to our high childhood poverty rates. Children who grow up in poverty generally have an unstable home life, having to constantly move around because their parents get evicted regularly, and they are undernourished, which affects their cognitive performance. But don't worry, Donald Trump in his proposed budget is cutting the school lunch program.
Please, sir. I want some more.
No. You have some compassion for the taxpayers. To compare, Finland, a country that regularly outperforms the United States in international tests, has a childhood poverty rate of 5%. The United States, in comparison, has a childhood poverty rate of 25%. The truth is, teachers, while important, are not miracle workers like we like to think of them in movies. They can't erase and fix all of society's problems. And to put that burden and expectation on them is like asking me to not eat Krispy Kreme donuts if they're right in front of me. Solutions. Diana Ratvich proposes a few solutions that evidence has showed can help. One of the solutions is making sure women have access to prenatal health care if pregnant. Women in poverty who don't have access to prenatal care often have babies who have learning disabilities because they don't get the proper care when they are pregnant. Another solution involves hiring more teachers so class sizes can be smaller, which has shown to have a positive effect on students' learning ability. Ratvich concludes that the problems in our education system are much more complex than easy explanations, and if we are serious about fixing them, we need to address them with balanced solutions.